Millionaire CEO expected a gold digger, but his bride's secret left him speechless. Ethan Cole stood outside the children's hospital ward, his breath fogging against the cold glass window. Inside, his wife sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a circle of children with bald heads and tired eyes. She was reading to them, her voice soft and animated, bringing characters to life for kids who had seen too much pain for their age. One little girl with an IV drip rested her head on Clara's shoulder. Another boy, no older than 6, held her hand while she turned the pages. Ethan's hands trembled as he watched. 3 months. 3 months of marriage, and he had called her a gold digger. He had treated her like a transaction, watched her every move with suspicion, waited for her to reveal her true agenda. He had been so sure he knew exactly who she was, another woman with a price tag, another person who wanted something from him. But what he had just discovered in the last 20 minutes shattered everything he thought he knew. The nurse's words still echoed in his mind. Your wife has been funding surgeries for children whose families can't afford treatment. She's saved 4 lives this month alone. Ethan pressed his forehead against the glass, guilt crushing his chest like a weight he couldn't lift. He had been so wrong, so terribly, completely wrong. Before we go any further, do me a favor, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this one, stories about love, redemption, and the kind of truth that changes everything, these are what we're all about. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. 3 months earlier, Ethan Cole sat in his corner office on the 47th floor of Cole Industries, staring out at the city skyline. He had built his empire from the ground up, a billion-dollar corporation that touched everything from real estate to technology. At 34, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. But success had come at a cost. He had learned early that people wanted things from him, his money, his connections, his name. And the one time he had allowed himself to believe in love, it had ended in betrayal so brutal that he swore he would never make that mistake again. Her name had been Jessica. They had been engaged, planning a future together, or so he thought, until he came home early one day and found her in bed with one of his investors, a man Ethan had trusted, a man he had considered a friend. She didn't even apologize. She just looked at him with cold eyes and said, "You were always going to choose your work over me anyway." That was 5 years ago, and Ethan hadn't let anyone close since. He had built walls around his heart that were thicker than the steel beams holding up his skyscrapers. So when his parents walked into his office that afternoon with serious expressions and careful words, Ethan already knew he wasn't going to like what they had to say. His mother sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap, while his father stood by the window, looking uncomfortable. "Ethan, we need to talk about your future," his mother began. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "If this is about me settling down again, we've had this conversation." "It's about the family legacy," his father interjected. "Your grandfather's will had provisions, conditions." Ethan frowned. His grandfather had passed away 6 months ago, leaving behind not just wealth, but expectations. What kind of conditions? His mother took a breath. "He wanted to see you married before he died. He believed that a man in your position needed a partner, someone to share the weight of responsibility. Since that didn't happen, he made arrangements." Arrangements? Ethan's voice was sharp now. "An arranged marriage," his father said plainly. "With the Hayes family, it's been agreed upon." Ethan stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "You can't be serious." "We are," his mother said quietly. "The contracts have been drawn up. Their daughter, Clara, has agreed. Your grandfather set aside a substantial sum for their family in exchange. Medical expenses, debts. They're struggling, Ethan. This helps everyone." "This is insane," Ethan said, pacing now. "You're asking me to marry a complete stranger? Someone who's clearly only doing this for money?" "You don't have to love her," his father said. "You just have to honor the commitment. 1 year. If after that you both want to walk away, the contract allows it. But your grandfather's estate won't be fully released until this condition is met." Ethan stared at them both, anger and disbelief boiling inside him. But beneath that there was something else, a cold, resigned acceptance. Because deep down this made sense to him. A marriage without love, without expectations, without the possibility of betrayal, a transaction. He could handle that. "Fine," he said finally, "but don't expect me to pretend this is anything more than what it is." 2 weeks later, Ethan stood at the altar of a small private chapel. There were no crowds, no celebrations, just his parents, her father, a lawyer, and a priest who looked like he had done this kind of thing before. Marriages that were obligations, not unions. And then she walked in. Clara Hayes. She wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed bride. Her dark hair was pulled back softly, and her face was calm but unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just walked down the aisle with quiet dignity, her eyes focused somewhere past him, like she was already resigned to whatever this was going to be. Ethan studied her as she approached. She was beautiful, he couldn't deny that, but beauty meant nothing to him anymore. He had learned that lesson the hard way. What mattered was intent, and he was convinced hers was the same as every other woman who had ever looked at him with interest: money. The ceremony was brief. They exchanged vows that felt hollow, words spoken out of duty rather than desire. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan leaned in and pressed a cold, passionless kiss to her lips. She didn't react, didn't pull away, didn't lean in, just accepted it like she accepted everything else. When they signed the marriage contract afterward, Ethan watched her hand shake slightly as she wrote her name. For a moment, just a moment, he wondered what her story was, why she had agreed to this. But then he reminded himself, it didn't matter. This was business. They drove to his penthouse in silence. Clara sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window at the city lights, her hands folded in her lap. Ethan didn't try to make conversation. What would he even say? When they arrived, he showed her to her room, a guest suite on the opposite side of the penthouse from his own bedroom. "You'll have your own space," he said flatly. "I don't expect us to share a room or pretend this is a real marriage. You're free to do whatever you want during the day, just don't embarrass me publicly." Clara looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a second he thought she might say something sharp, something defensive, but instead she just nodded. "Understood. There's a credit card in your name on the dresser," he continued. "Use it for whatever you need. Clothes, spa days, whatever it is women like you do." Her jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained even. "I won't be needing that." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "It's part of the arrangement." "I didn't agree to be bought," Clara said quietly. "I agreed to a marriage contract. Those are different things." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway of a room that would be hers, but never feel like home. The first week of their marriage was strange and silent. Clara moved through the penthouse like a ghost, present but not intrusive. She made her own meals, cleaned up after herself, and disappeared for hours during the day. Ethan told himself he didn't care where she went, but he noticed. Of course he noticed. She left early every morning around 7, dressed in simple clothes, jeans, sweaters, nothing flashy. She came back in the evening, sometimes as late as 9 or 10, looking tired but never complaining. She never asked him for anything. Not money, not attention, not even conversation. It frustrated him in a way he couldn't explain. He had expected her to start making demands, to test the limits of his wealth, to show her true colors, but she didn't, and that made him suspicious. One evening, about 10 days into the marriage, Ethan came home earlier than usual. He found Clara in the kitchen making tea. She looked up when he walked in, surprise flickering across her face. "You're home early," she said. "It's my house," he replied, more defensively than he intended. "I didn't mean—" she started, then stopped. "Never mind." She poured her tea and moved to leave, but Ethan found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "Where do you go every day?" Clara paused, her back to him. "Does it matter? You're my wife, technically." She turned to face him, and there was something in her eyes, hurt, maybe, or disappointment. "I go where I'm needed," she said simply. "That's not an answer." It's the only one you're going to get." She walked past him, and he didn't stop her. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind kept circling back to her, to the way she had looked at him in the kitchen, to the quietness of her presence, to the fact that she hadn't touched the credit card he had left for her. He got out of bed and walked to his office, pulling up a background check he had ordered on her before the wedding. Clara Hayes, 29 years old, daughter of Dr. Richard Hayes, a retired literature professor. Mother deceased 3 years ago after a battle with cancer. Clara had worked as a pediatric nurse at County General Hospital, but had left her position 2 years ago. No criminal record, no debt in her own name. Everything about her seemed ordinary. So why did this arrangement exist? Why had her family agreed? The next morning, Ethan called his lawyer. "I want to know more about the Hayes family, why they needed this marriage contract." His lawyer hesitated. "Mr. Cole, that information is confidential under the terms." "I don't care about the terms. Find out." 3 days later, the report came back. Dr. Richard Hayes had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer 18 months ago. The treatments were experimental and not covered by insurance. The medical bills had destroyed their savings. Clara had taken out loans, worked double shifts, sold everything she could. But it wasn't enough. When Ethan's grandfather had approached them with the marriage arrangement, it had come with a payout that would cover all of Richard's treatments, and then some. Clara hadn't agreed to marry a billionaire because she wanted wealth. She had agreed because it was the only way to save her father's life. Ethan sat in his office, the report in his hands, and felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Guilt, maybe, or shame. He had judged her so quickly, so harshly, assumed the worst, because that was what he had been trained to do, protect himself, trust no one. But Clara hadn't been scheming. She had been surviving. He didn't know what to do with that information. Didn't know how to reconcile the woman he had imagined her to be with the woman she actually was. So he did what he always did when emotions got complicated. He buried himself in work and pretended nothing had changed. But things had changed. Whether he wanted to admit it or not, he started noticing small things. The way Clara always made sure there was fresh coffee in the morning, even though she drank tea. The way she left books on the table, old novels, poetry, things his grandfather used to read. The way she never turned on the TV or made noise late at night, respecting his space, even though this was her home too now. And he noticed the way she looked sometimes when she thought no one was watching. Sad, tired, like she was carrying a weight she couldn't put down. 3 weeks into the marriage, Ethan's assistant mentioned something in passing. "I saw your wife at County General yesterday," she said while dropping off files. "I didn't know she volunteered there." Ethan looked up sharply. "What?" "Yeah. I had to drop off some donations for the company's charity program. She was in the pediatric wing. I didn't want to interrupt. She looked pretty focused." Ethan's mind started racing. The pediatric wing, the same hospital where she used to work. What was she doing there? After his assistant left, he sat at his desk, staring at nothing. He could ask Clara directly. But something told him she wouldn't answer, not truthfully, not to him. So he made a decision he wasn't proud of. That evening he told Clara he would be working late, watched as she nodded, and left the penthouse at her usual time. And then he followed her. He kept his distance, staying a few cars behind as she drove across the city. She didn't go anywhere unexpected, didn't meet anyone suspicious. She went straight to County General Hospital, parked in the visitor lot and walked inside. Ethan parked and followed on foot, his heart pounding for reasons he didn't fully understand. He watched as she checked in at the front desk, as the receptionist smiled warmly at her like she was a regular. Clara walked through the halls with familiarity, turning corners without hesitation until she reached the pediatric wing. And that's when Ethan saw it. Saw her. She pushed open the door to a large room filled with children. Some were in beds, some in wheelchairs, some sitting on the floor. All of them sick, all of them fighting battles no child should have to fight. And the moment Clara walked in, their faces lit up. "Miss Clara!" a little girl shouted, running over as fast as her weak legs could carry her. Clara knelt down and caught her in a hug, laughing softly. "Hi, sweetheart. "How are you feeling today?" "Better now that you're here," the girl said. Other children gathered around her, and Clara greeted each one by name. She knew them. She knew their stories, their fears, their favorite things. She sat down on the floor, pulled a book from her bag, and started reading. Ethan stood outside the window, frozen. This wasn't volunteering. This was love. Pure, selfless, undeniable love. He watched as she read with different voices for different characters, making the kids laugh despite their pain. Watched as she held a boy's hand while a nurse adjusted his IV. Watched as she wiped tears from a mother's face and whispered something that made the woman smile through her grief. He didn't know how long he stood there. Time seemed to stop, and then a voice beside him broke the silence. "She's incredible, isn't she?" Ethan turned to find a nurse standing next to him, older, with kind eyes. "You're Mr. Cole," the nurse said. It wasn't a question. "How did you—" Clara mentioned she got married. Didn't say much about it, but we could tell it wasn't a love story. Not yet anyway. The nurse smiled gently. "She doesn't know I'm here," Ethan said quietly. "I figured." The nurse looked back through the window at Clara. "She used to work here, you know. Best pediatric nurse we ever had. But when her mother got sick, she had to choose. And Clara always chooses the people she loves." Ethan's throat felt tight. "Why does she come back?" "Because these kids don't have anyone else," the nurse said. "Some of them are orphans. Some have parents who can't afford to visit because they're working 3 jobs to pay for treatment. Clara makes sure they're not alone." "She pays for their treatment," Ethan said, the realization hitting him. The nurse looked at him surprised. "You know about that?" "I'm starting to." The nurse pulled a folder from the station desk and handed it to him. "She's been using the allowance from your marriage to fund surgeries. 4 kids in the last 2 months. 2 heart surgeries, 1 kidney transplant, 1 experimental treatment for leukemia. Every single one of them is alive because of her." Ethan opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were receipts, medical records, thank you letters from parents, photos of children smiling in hospital beds, and at the bottom, a handwritten note on Clara's stationery. "Every life is worth saving, even if no one knows." He couldn't breathe. The folder slipped from his hands, papers scattering on the floor. The nurse bent down to help him pick them up, her voice soft. "She didn't marry you for your money, Mr. Cole. She married you so she could give it away." Ethan leaned against the wall, his vision blurring. 3 months. 3 months of coldness, suspicion, cruelty. 3 months of treating her like she was beneath him, like she was just another person trying to use him. And the whole time, she had been quietly saving lives. She hadn't asked for anything, hadn't demanded recognition or gratitude. She had just done what she thought was right. "Does she know I'm here?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," the nurse said. "And I won't tell her unless you want me to." Ethan shook his head. "Not yet." He looked back through the window one more time. Clara was still reading, her voice carrying softly through the glass. A little boy had fallen asleep with his head in her lap. She stroked his hair gently, never stopping the story for the other children who were still listening. Ethan turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. He didn't trust himself to stay any longer, didn't trust what he might say or do if he walked through that door right now. The guilt was suffocating him, pressing down on his chest like a physical weight. He had been so wrong, so completely, utterly wrong. That night, Ethan sat in his home office with every light off except the desk lamp. The folder from the hospital lay open in front of him. He had read every page at least 3 times, every receipt, every letter, every medical record. One letter was from a mother whose 6-year-old daughter had needed a heart transplant. "I don't know who you are," the letter read, "but you gave me my daughter's life back. We had given up hope. The surgery was too expensive and we had run out of options. Then the hospital called and said an anonymous donor had covered everything. My baby is alive because of you. I pray for you every night. I pray that whoever you are, you know that you are an angel on earth." Ethan's hands trembled as he set the letter down. Another letter was from a teenage boy who had survived leukemia. "Dear Angel," it began, and Ethan almost smiled at that. Angel. If only the boy knew that the angel had a name, and that her husband had treated her like a criminal. I'm 15 now, and I'm going to live to see 16 because of you. The doctors said the treatment you paid for saved my life. I don't know why you did it. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I want you to know that I'm going to make my life matter. I'm going to become a doctor so I can help other kids like me. Thank you for giving me the chance. Ethan closed his eyes, pressing the heels of his palms against them. He thought about every cold word he had spoken to Clara, every suspicious glance, every moment he had made her feel small and unwanted in what was supposed to be her home. She had never fought back, never defended herself, never told him what she was doing or why. She had just quietly continued to be exactly who she was, someone who put others before herself, even when it cost her everything. He pulled out his laptop and started searching. Clara Hayes, pediatric nurse, County General Hospital. He found articles from 2 years ago, back when she was still working there. One article featured her in a piece about hospital staff going above and beyond. Nurse Clara Hayes has been known to stay hours past her shift to comfort frightened children, the article read. She brings books from her own collection, pays for art supplies out of her own pocket, and has even been seen sleeping in chairs next to patients who have no family to stay with them. There was a photo of her in scrubs, holding a newborn baby, her face radiant with a smile Ethan had never seen in person. She looked so alive in that picture, so full of light. Not like the quiet, resigned woman who lived in his penthouse now. He kept digging, finding more and more. A fundraiser she had organized for the hospital's children's wing, a charity marathon she had run to raise money for pediatric cancer research. Testimonials from parents whose children she had cared for. Clara stayed with my son the entire night before his surgery, one parent wrote. She held his hand and sang to him until he fell asleep. She didn't have to do that. It wasn't her job. But she did it anyway because that's who she is. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. Who was this woman? And why had he been so determined not to see her? Have you ever misjudged someone so badly that it haunted you? Maybe you assumed the worst about someone's intentions, only to discover they were better than you ever imagined. If that's ever happened to you, drop a comment below and share your story. And if this is hitting you right in the heart, don't forget to hit that like button. Trust me, you're going to want to see how Ethan makes this right. The next morning, Ethan woke up after barely sleeping. His mind had been racing all night, replaying everything he had learned. He went downstairs and found Clara in the kitchen, making tea like she did every morning. She looked up when he walked in, surprise flickering across her face again. "You're up early," she said quietly. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. That was true enough. She nodded and turned back to her tea, and Ethan stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to say. He wanted to tell her he knew, wanted to apologize for everything. But the words stuck in his throat. How do you apologize for 3 months of cruelty? How do you tell someone you've been completely wrong about them without sounding like a fool? "Clara," he started, then stopped. She looked at him, waiting. He tried again, but his phone rang. Work, always work. He looked at the screen, then at her, then back at the screen. For the first time in his professional life, he considered not answering. But old habits die hard. "I have to take this," he said. Clara just nodded and took her tea, walking away before he could say anything else. Ethan answered the call, but he didn't hear a word the person on the other end was saying. He was too busy watching Clara disappear down the hallway, wondering if he had just missed his chance. The day dragged on endlessly. Ethan sat through meetings without really being present. His assistant asked him 3 times if he was feeling all right. He wasn't. He kept thinking about Clara sitting on that hospital floor, surrounded by children who loved her, kept thinking about the letters from parents who called her an angel, kept thinking about how she came home every night to a cold penthouse and a colder husband, and never once complained. By 3 in the afternoon, he couldn't take it anymore. He cancelled the rest of his meetings, grabbed his coat, and left the office. His driver looked surprised when Ethan told him where they were going. "County General Hospital," Ethan said. "Is everything all right, sir?" "Just drive." When they arrived, Ethan walked through the main entrance with purpose. He had no plan, no script, no idea what he was going to say. He just knew he needed to do something. He found the hospital administrator's office and walked in without an appointment. The receptionist tried to stop him, but he was Ethan Cole, and people didn't usually say no to Ethan Cole. The administrator, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, looked up from her desk with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Mr. Cole," she said, standing up quickly, "I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled." "We didn't," Ethan said. "I'm here about your pediatric wing." The administrator's expression shifted to confusion. "Our pediatric wing?" "I want to make a donation," Ethan said. "A significant one." The woman's eyes widened. "That's incredibly generous, Mr. Cole. May I ask what brought this on?" Ethan hesitated. "Let's just say I recently learned about the amazing work being done here, particularly with patients who can't afford treatment." The administrator smiled. "We do try our best, though it's always a struggle. There are so many children who need help, and our funds are limited." "Not anymore," Ethan said. He pulled out his checkbook, something he rarely carried but had grabbed on instinct this morning. "I'm donating $1 million to the pediatric wing. Specifically, I want it used to cover medical expenses for children whose families can't afford treatment." The administrator's hand went to her mouth. "Mr. Cole, I don't know what to say." "There's one condition," Ethan continued. "The donation is to be made in my wife's name, Clara Cole." He said her full name for the first time, and it felt right. More right than anything had felt in a long time. "Clara Hayes, Clara Cole," the administrator corrected herself, recognition dawning on her face. "She volunteers here. She used to work here." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "She's remarkable." The administrator's expression softened. "She is. We've missed her terribly since she left, but she still comes by almost every day. The children adore her." "I know that too," Ethan said. He finished writing the check and handed it over. The administrator took it with shaking hands. "This is going to change so many lives," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me," Ethan said. "Thank my wife. She's the one who showed me what really matters." He left the office before the administrator could say anything else. His heart was pounding, and he felt strange. Nervous, maybe. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt nervous about anything. He walked through the hospital halls until he found the pediatric wing. Through the window, he could see Clara again. She was there, just like yesterday. But today, Ethan didn't watch from the shadows. Today, he opened the door and walked in. The children looked up at the stranger entering their space. So did Clara. Her eyes went wide with shock. "Ethan," she said, standing up quickly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see you," he said simply. The children were staring at him now, curious and a little wary. Clara walked over to him, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. "Did something happen?" "No," Ethan said. "Nothing's wrong. I just—" He looked past her at the children, then back at her face. "Can we talk? Please." Clara hesitated, then nodded. She turned to the children. "I'll be right back, okay? Miss Jennifer is going to come read to you." She called for one of the nurses, who came in with a smile and took over story time. Then Clara led Ethan out into the hallway. They stood facing each other, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Clara crossed her arms, not defensively, but like she was holding herself together. "How did you know I was here?" she asked finally. "I followed you," Ethan admitted. "Yesterday." Her eyes widened. "You followed me?" "I know how that sounds," he said quickly. "But I needed to know where you were going every day. I thought—" He stopped, shame coloring his face. "You thought what?" Clara asked, her voice hard now. "That I was cheating on you, that I was doing something dishonest." "Yes," Ethan said, because there was no point in lying now. "I thought you were hiding something, and you were. Just not what I expected." Clara's expression tightened. "So now you know. I spend my days with sick children. Is that acceptable to you?" "Clara," he started, but she cut him off. "Is this going to be a problem? Because it's not negotiable. This is what I do. This is who I am." I know, Ethan said, and I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to... He struggled for the right words. I'm here to apologize. Clara blinked, clearly not expecting that. Apologize? I was wrong about you, Ethan said, his voice raw. From the very beginning, I was wrong. I assumed you were like everyone else who's ever wanted something from me. I treated you terribly. I was cold and suspicious and cruel, and you didn't deserve any of it. Clara's arms dropped to her sides, her expression softening slightly. Ethan, I know about the surgeries you've been funding, he continued. I know about the children you've saved. I saw the letters from their parents. I read about the work you did here before we got married. And I realized that while I was busy protecting myself from people who might hurt me, I became the person who hurt you. Tears were forming in Clara's eyes now. You don't have to... Yes, I do, Ethan said. You've been nothing but kind and respectful, even when I gave you every reason not to be. You've been using the allowance I gave you, money I thought you'd waste on yourself to save children's lives. You're everything I didn't believe existed anymore. You're genuine and selfless and so damn good, and I've been too blind to see it. A tear rolled down Clara's cheek. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it, Ethan said, and because I just donated $1 million to this hospital in your name. Clara's eyes went wide. You what? $1 million, Ethan repeated. For the pediatric wing, specifically for children whose families can't afford treatment. I want your work to continue. I want you to save as many lives as possible, and I want you to know that I see you now. Really see you. Clara covered her mouth with her hand, tears flowing freely now. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Ethan said softly. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong about you, Clara, and I've never been more grateful to be wrong. They stood there in the hospital hallway, the sounds of children laughing filtering through the door behind them. And for the first time since they had met, the walls between them started to crumble. Clara wiped her eyes, taking a shaky breath. Thank you, she whispered, for the donation, for the apology, for... She gestured vaguely. For seeing me. I should have seen you from the beginning, Ethan said. They stood in silence for a moment longer, and then Clara did something that surprised him. She reached out and took his hand. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. Her hand was warm in his, and Ethan realized this was the first time they had touched with any real tenderness. Do you want to meet them? Clara asked quietly. The children? Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. Clara led him back into the room, still holding his hand. The children looked up curiously as they entered. Everyone, Clara said, her voice gentle. This is my husband, Ethan. The word husband sounded different coming from her now, not like a legal term, but like something that might actually mean something someday. A little girl with a pink headscarf raised her hand. Is he nice? She asked seriously. Clara looked at Ethan, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart skip. Yes, she said. I think he is. Ethan spent the next hour sitting on the floor with Clara and the children. He listened as she read stories, watched as she comforted a boy who was scared about an upcoming procedure, helped her hand out coloring books and crayons, and slowly something inside him began to shift. These children had every reason to be bitter, angry, sad, but when Clara was around they were just kids, laughing, playing, being silly. She gave them that gift. And now, Ethan realized, he had the power to give them something too. Not just money, though, that mattered, but presence, attention, care. When it was time to leave, the children hugged Clara goodbye, and to Ethan's surprise, a few of them hugged him too. Will you come back? The little girl with the pink headscarf asked him. Ethan looked at Clara, then back at the girl. Yes, he said. I will. And he meant it. They walked out of the hospital together as the sun was setting. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Thank you for letting me in today, he said as they reached the car. Clara smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Thank you for showing up. If this story is touching your heart, Please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like Ethan and Clara's remind us that people can change, that assumptions can be broken, and that love can grow in the most unexpected places. Don't go anywhere, because what happens next is going to show you just how beautiful redemption can be. The drive home was different from every other drive they had taken together. They actually talked, not about the weather or schedules, but about real things. Clara told him about the children, about little Sophie, who loved princess stories and wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, about Marcus, the teenage boy who was learning to play guitar during his treatments, about Emma, who had just celebrated her 8th birthday in the hospital because she had been there for 6 months straight. Ethan listened, really listened, and felt his heart breaking and healing at the same time. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Do what?" "See all that pain every day and not let it destroy you." Clara was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the city passing by. "Because if I let it destroy me, I can't help them," she said finally. "Those kids need someone to show them that life is still worth living, even when it's hard. They need someone to remind them that they matter, that they're loved." "You do that," Ethan said. "You give them that." Clara turned to look at him. "We can do it together now," she said softly. "If you want to." Ethan felt something tight in his chest loosen. "I want to." When they arrived home, Ethan held the door open for Clara, another small gesture, but one he had never done before. She noticed. He could tell by the slight surprise in her eyes, followed by a small smile. They walked into the penthouse, and for the first time it didn't feel like two strangers occupying the same space. It felt like two people beginning to build something. "Are you hungry?" Clara asked. "I was going to make some dinner." "Let me help," Ethan offered. Clara looked at him like he had just offered to fly to the moon. "You cook?" "Not well," Ethan admitted, "but I can learn." They ended up in the kitchen together, and it was awkward at first. Ethan didn't know where anything was in his own kitchen because he always ordered in or ate at restaurants. Clara had to show him where the pots and pans were kept. But there was something nice about the awkwardness, something human. They made pasta together. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti with marinara sauce. But when they sat down at the dining table to eat, it felt like the first real meal they had shared. "This is good," Ethan said, and he meant it. Not because the pasta was extraordinary, but because they had made it together. Clara smiled. "It's just pasta." "It's more than that," Ethan said. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and then Ethan spoke again. "Tell me about your mother." Clara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down slowly. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I want to know you," Ethan said simply. "The real you, not the version I made up in my head." Clara took a breath, her eyes distant. "Her name was Catherine. She was a teacher. Literature, like my father. They met in graduate school and fell in love over poetry and late-night debates about classic novels." She smiled at the memory. "She was the kindest person I've ever known. When she got sick, she never complained, not once. Even when the pain was unbearable, she would smile and tell me she was grateful for every moment she had." Clara's voice cracked slightly. "I took leave from the hospital to take care of her, spent every day with her for the last 6 months of her life. She died on a Tuesday morning, with me and my father beside her. Her last words were, 'Take care of each other.'" Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. "I tried. I really tried to take care of my father. But then he got sick too, and I couldn't lose him. I couldn't." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "You didn't lose him. He's still here because of you." "Because of you," Clara corrected. "Because of this arrangement. Because your grandfather—" "My grandfather saw something I was too stupid to see," Ethan said. "He saw that you were exactly what I needed, even if I didn't know it yet." Clara looked at him through her tears. "I didn't want to marry you. I want you to know that. I didn't want to marry someone who saw me as a transaction. But I also didn't have a choice. My father needed help, and this was the only way." "I know," Ethan said. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you were put in that position. I'm sorry I made it harder than it had to be. You're making it better now, Clara whispered. They sat there, hands joined across the table, and something shifted between them. Something real and fragile and worth protecting. That night, after Clara went to bed, Ethan sat in his office again. But this time, he wasn't looking at reports about her. He was planning. He pulled up his contacts and started making calls. First to the hospital administrator, to discuss setting up a permanent fund for pediatric care. Then to his lawyers, to establish a foundation in Clara's name. Then to his assistant, with instructions to clear his schedule every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. I'll be volunteering at County General Hospital, he told her. His assistant was silent for a moment, clearly shocked. Volunteering, sir? Yes, is that a problem? No, sir. Not at all. I'll make the arrangements. Ethan hung up and leaned back in his chair. For years he had measured his worth by his bank account, his business success, his power. But sitting on that hospital floor today, watching Clara bring joy to children who had so little, he had realized something. None of his achievements meant anything if he wasn't using them to make a difference. Clara had been making a difference all along, and now finally he was going to help her. The next few weeks brought changes that surprised everyone who knew Ethan Cole. He started leaving work early twice a week to go to the hospital with Clara. At first he was awkward with the children, unsure how to talk to them. But Clara was patient, showing him how to read with expression, how to listen when they wanted to talk, how to just be present. Slowly the children started to warm up to him. Sophie, the little girl with the pink headscarf, decided that Ethan was her business friend because he wore suits. She would ask him questions about what he did at work, and Ethan found himself explaining complicated business concepts in terms a 7-year-old could understand. So you're like a boss? Sophie asked one day. Sort of, Ethan said. Then you should give everyone raises, Sophie declared. Miss Clara says people work better when they feel appreciated. Ethan laughed. Miss Clara is very smart. I know, Sophie said seriously. That's why I want to be like her when I grow up. Marcus, the teenage boy, bonded with Ethan over technology. When Ethan learned that Marcus loved coding but didn't have a computer, he brought him a laptop the next week. This is too much, Clara whispered when she saw it. No, it's not, Ethan said. He has talent. He should have the tools to develop it. Marcus's face when Ethan gave him the laptop was something Ethan would never forget. Pure joy. Pure gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Cole, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to make you proud. You already do, Ethan said. And he meant it. At home, things were changing too. Ethan and Clara started having breakfast together every morning, started talking about their days, started learning each other's habits and preferences. Ethan learned that Clara loved old movies and would stay up late watching black and white films. Clara learned that Ethan was actually terrible at relaxing and needed help remembering to take breaks. One evening, Clara found him working in his office at 11 at night. She walked in with a cup of tea and set it on his desk. You need to sleep, she said gently. I will, Ethan said, not looking up from his computer. Just need to finish this. Clara reached over and closed his laptop. Ethan looked up, surprised. Clara, the work will be there tomorrow, she said, but you won't be any good to anyone if you burn yourself out, trust me. I learned that the hard way. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the concern in her eyes. When was the last time someone had cared about his well-being? Okay, he said quietly. You're right. He took the tea and followed her out of the office. They ended up on the couch in the living room, and Clara turned on one of her old movies. Ethan had never been into classic films, but he found himself enjoying it. Or maybe he was just enjoying sitting next to Clara, feeling her warmth beside him. Halfway through the movie, Clara fell asleep, her head dropping onto Ethan's shoulder. He froze for a moment, then carefully shifted so she would be more comfortable. She murmured something in her sleep and curled closer to him. Ethan sat there, barely breathing, afraid to move and wake her. And he realized something that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. He was falling for his wife who he had treated so terribly, His wife, who had every reason to hate him but had chosen kindness instead. His wife, who was the best person he had ever known. He was falling in love with her, and he had no idea if she could ever feel the same way about him. When Clara woke up an hour later, she was embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said, sitting up quickly. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." "It's okay," Ethan said softly. "You were tired." Clara rubbed her eyes. "I should go to bed." "Clara, wait," Ethan said as she stood up. She turned back to him. "Thank you," he said, "for caring, for the tea, for reminding me that there's more to life than work." Clara smiled. "You're welcome." She started to leave, then paused. "Ethan, I'm glad you came to the hospital that day. I'm glad you know about the children now. It means a lot to me that you're part of it." "It means a lot to me too," Ethan said. After she left, Ethan sat in the dark living room for a long time. He thought about the man he had been 3 months ago, cold, closed off, convinced that people were only out for themselves. He thought about Clara and how she had proven him wrong in every possible way. He thought about the children at the hospital and how they had taught him that joy could exist even in the hardest circumstances. And he thought about the future, about what it might look like if he and Clara could turn this arrangement into something real, something built on respect and trust, and maybe, eventually, love. He wanted that, more than he had wanted anything in a long time. But he knew he couldn't rush it. Clara had agreed to a business arrangement, not a love story. He had to prove to her that he was worthy of more, that he could be the partner she deserved. So he decided to show her, one day at a time. The next morning, Ethan woke up early and made breakfast. It wasn't much, scrambled eggs and toast, but he put effort into it. When Clara came into the kitchen, she stopped in surprise. "You made breakfast?" "I did," Ethan said, feeling oddly nervous. "I hope it's edible." Clara sat down and took a bite of the eggs. "It's good," she said with a smile. "You're full of surprises lately." "I'm trying," Ethan said. Over the next few weeks, he kept trying. He remembered her favorite tea and made sure it was always stocked. He noticed she liked fresh flowers and started having them delivered to the penthouse every week. He asked about her father and offered to arrange the best possible care for him. "You don't have to do that," Clara said. "I want to," Ethan replied. "Your father is important to you, which makes him important to me." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Ethan. That means more than you know." Slowly, carefully, they built a friendship, and then gradually it started becoming more. It happened in small moments. The way Ethan would reach for Clara's hand without thinking when they walked through the hospital. The way Clara would touch his arm when she laughed at something he said. The way they would sit close together on the couch, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The way they started saying goodnight with lingering looks that suggested neither of them wanted to separate. One evening, about 2 months after Ethan's first visit to the hospital, they were at a fundraising gala for children's health care. Ethan had insisted Clara come with him as his date, not just his wife. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, and when Ethan saw her, his breath caught. "You look beautiful," he said. Clara blushed. "Thank you. You look very handsome." At the gala, people kept approaching them, congratulating Ethan on his foundation work and praising Clara for her dedication to the children. Several people mentioned what a perfect couple they made. Ethan found himself agreeing. During dinner, there were speeches about the impact of charitable giving. The hospital administrator spoke about the Cole Foundation and how it had already saved dozens of children's lives. But the real hero, the administrator said, is Clara Cole. Her compassion and dedication inspire everyone who knows her. This foundation exists because of her heart. Everyone turned to look at Clara, who looked uncomfortable with the attention. Ethan reached under the table and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, grateful. After dinner, there was dancing. Ethan stood and offered Clara his hand. "Dance with me?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. On the dance floor, Ethan pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other holding hers. They swayed to the music, and for a moment the rest of the world disappeared. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked quietly. "You seemed overwhelmed during the speech." "I'm not used to being in the spotlight," Clara admitted. "I just want to help the kids. I don't need recognition." "I know," Ethan said. "That's one of the things I love about you." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Clara looked up at him, her eyes wide. "One of the things you love about me." Ethan's heart was pounding. He could backtrack, play it off as a casual comment, but he was tired of hiding. "Yes," he said simply. "One of many things, actually." Clara's breath hitched. "Ethan." "I know this wasn't supposed to be real," he said. "I know we started as a contract, an arrangement. But Clara, somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real for me, and I need you to know that I—" He paused, gathering courage. "I'm falling in love with you." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan continued quickly. "I don't expect you to feel the same way. I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you, but I needed to be honest. I needed you to know." Clara stopped dancing, standing still in the middle of the floor. Ethan's heart sank. He had said too much, too soon. But then Clara smiled through her tears. "You really are full of surprises," she whispered. "Clara, I'm falling in love with you too," she said. Ethan felt like the world had stopped. "You are?" "I didn't want to," Clara said with a small laugh. "I told myself it was just an arrangement, that I shouldn't get attached, but then you showed up at the hospital, and you apologized, and you started really seeing me, and you were so sweet with the children, and you made me breakfast even though you're terrible at cooking." Ethan laughed, tears forming in his own eyes now. "And I realized," Clara continued, "that the man I married on paper was becoming the man I wanted to be married to in reality." Ethan cupped her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Really kiss you, not like at the wedding?" Clara nodded, her smile radiant. Ethan leaned in and kissed her, and it was nothing like their cold, obligatory wedding kiss. This kiss was warm and tender and full of promise. This kiss was the beginning of something beautiful. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. The people around them had stopped to watch, and now they were applauding. Ethan and Clara laughed, embarrassed but happy. "Let's get out of here," Ethan whispered. Clara nodded. They left the gala hand in hand, slipping out before anyone could stop them for more conversations or photos. In the car ride home, they sat close together, fingers intertwined. Neither of them spoke, but the silence was comfortable, filled with the weight of what they had just confessed to each other. When they arrived at the penthouse, Ethan opened Clara's door and helped her out. They walked inside together, and this time when they reached the hallway where their separate bedrooms were, they both stopped. "I don't want to say goodnight yet," Ethan admitted. "Neither do I," Clara said softly. They ended up in the living room again, on the same couch where Clara had fallen asleep on his shoulder weeks ago. But this time, Ethan wrapped his arm around her, and she curled into him intentionally, her head resting on his chest. "Tell me something," Clara said. "Anything. When did you start falling for me? When did it change?" Ethan thought about it. "I think it started the night I followed you to the hospital. Seeing you with those children, seeing who you really were, it cracked something open in me, but I didn't fully realize it until you fell asleep right here, on this couch. I remember sitting here, afraid to move, because I didn't want to wake you, and thinking that I could sit like this forever. That's when I knew." Clara lifted her head to look at him. "I started falling for you the day you showed up at the hospital and apologized. No one had ever done that before, admitted they were wrong so completely, so honestly. And then when you donated that money in my name, I saw your heart, the real you underneath all the walls you'd built." "I built a lot of walls," Ethan said quietly. "After Jessica, after the betrayal, I convinced myself that protecting my heart was the same as being strong. But I was just afraid of being hurt again." "I understand that," Clara said. "After my mother died, I was afraid too, afraid of losing anyone else I loved. That's why I threw myself into work, into helping others. If I was always taking care of someone else, I didn't have to think about my own pain." Ethan kissed the top of her head. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two broken people trying to put each other back together. Maybe we're not broken, Clara said. Maybe we were just waiting for the right person to show us we were whole all along. They stayed up late into the night, talking about everything. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Ethan told her about building his company from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success. Clara told him about her mother's final days, about the guilt she still carried for not being able to save her. You can't save everyone, Ethan said gently. But you save who you can. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I needed to hear that. I need you to know something else, Ethan said. This foundation, this work we're doing, it's not my redemption project. It's not about me feeling better about myself. It's about us building something meaningful together. You're not my charity case, and I'm not your benefactor. We're partners. Equals. Partners, Clara repeated, smiling through her tears. I like the sound of that. As the early morning light started filtering through the windows, Clara yawned. I should probably sleep, she said, reluctantly. Probably, Ethan agreed, though he didn't want to let her go. Clara stood up, and Ethan stood with her. They walked to the hallway together, and when they reached Clara's bedroom door, she turned to face him. Ethan. Yes? Would you want to have breakfast together tomorrow? Actually together, like a real date? Ethan smiled, his heart full. I would love that. Clara kissed his cheek softly. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Clara. He watched her go into her room, and then walked to his own bedroom with a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in years. That night, for the first time since his grandfather had died, Ethan slept peacefully. No nightmares about betrayal, no anxiety about business, just peace. The next morning, Ethan woke up early and went all out on breakfast. He looked up recipes online, called his assistant for recommendations on the best bakery in the city, and set the dining table with care. When Clara emerged from her room, she stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Fresh flowers in a vase, croissants from the French bakery downtown, fresh fruit arranged beautifully, coffee and tea, both prepared perfectly. Ethan Cole, she said, shaking her head with a smile. When you commit to something, you really commit. Only when it matters, he said, pulling out her chair. And you matter. They ate breakfast together, laughing and talking like they had known each other for years instead of months. After breakfast, Clara had to visit her father at the care facility where he was receiving treatment. Come with me, she said to Ethan. I'd like you to meet him properly. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. Are you sure? I'm sure, Clara said. You're important to me. He should know that. They drove to the care facility together, and Clara held Ethan's hand the entire way. When they walked into Richard Hayes's room, the older man looked up from his book. He was thin, weakened by illness, but his eyes were sharp and kind. Clara, sweetheart, he said, his face lighting up. Then he saw Ethan, and his expression became curious. Dad, this is Ethan, Clara said. My husband. Richard studied Ethan for a long moment. The one from the arrangement. Yes, sir, Ethan said, though it's become much more than an arrangement. Richard raised an eyebrow. Has it now? Clara blushed. Dad, sit down, both of you, Richard said, gesturing to the chairs beside his bed. They sat, and Richard looked between them. When this marriage was first proposed, I had my doubts, Richard said. I didn't want my daughter to be a transaction, but I also didn't want to die and leave her with insurmountable debt. I was caught between a father's love and a father's pride. I understand, sir, Ethan said quietly. Do you? Richard asked, not unkindly, because from what Clara's told me, you didn't exactly welcome her with open arms at first. Ethan felt his face flush with shame. No, sir, I didn't. I was wrong about your daughter. I made assumptions based on my own past hurts, and I treated her unfairly. I'm not proud of that, but I'm trying to make it right now. I'm trying to be the man she deserves. Richard was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. Clara's mother always said that a good man isn't one who never makes mistakes. It's one who owns up to them and does better. Are you doing better, Mr. Cole? Every day, sir, Ethan said. I'm trying every day. Richard looked at his daughter. And you, Clara? Are you happy? Clara took Ethan's hand, squeezing it. Yes, Dad. I'm happy. Richard nodded slowly. Then that's all that matters. Catherine would have liked you, Ethan. She always believed in second chances and new beginnings. I wish I could have met her, Ethan said sincerely. So do I, Richard said, but I see her in Clara every day. The kindness, the strength, the unwavering belief in the good in people. That was all Catherine. They spent the next hour visiting with Richard. Ethan listened as father and daughter talked about books and memories. He watched the love between them and felt grateful that Clara had this, even in the midst of hardship. As they were leaving, Richard called Ethan back. Take care of her, he said quietly. She takes care of everyone else. Make sure someone's taking care of her. I will, sir, Ethan promised. I absolutely will. Over the following months, Ethan kept that promise. He made sure Clara ate when she was too busy caring for others. He reminded her to rest when she pushed herself too hard. He celebrated her victories and held her through her losses. Because not every child at the hospital survived, and those losses hit Clara hard. The first time they lost a patient together, Ethan held Clara while she cried. A little boy named Daniel, who had fought cancer for 2 years, finally lost the battle. Clara had been with him at the end, holding his hand so he wouldn't be alone. That night, she came home devastated. Ethan found her sitting on the floor of the living room, still in her clothes from the hospital, tears streaming down her face. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her and pulled her into his arms. I couldn't save him, Clara sobbed. I tried so hard and I couldn't save him. You gave him love, Ethan said softly. You gave him comfort and joy and kindness. You made his life better, Clara. You can't save everyone, but you made his time here mean something. Clara cried until she had no tears left, and Ethan held her through all of it. When she finally calmed down, she looked up at him. How did I get so lucky, she whispered, to have you? I'm the lucky one, Ethan said. You've made me a better person, Clara. You've given my life meaning beyond money and business. You've shown me what really matters. These moments, the hard ones, the painful ones, brought them even closer together. They learned how to support each other, how to be there for each other in ways that mattered. And through it all, their love grew stronger. 6 months after their confession at the gala, Ethan surprised Clara with a weekend trip. Where are we going? She asked as they drove out of the city. You'll see, Ethan said with a mysterious smile. They ended up at a beautiful coastal town, staying at a charming bed and breakfast overlooking the ocean. It's gorgeous, Clara said, looking out at the water. I thought you could use a break, Ethan said. We both could. They spent the weekend walking on the beach, having long dinners, and just being together without the pressures of work and hospitals and responsibilities. On their last evening there, as they watched the sunset from the beach, Ethan took Clara's hand. I want to ask you something, he said. Clara turned to him, curious. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's eyes widened. Ethan, I know we're already married, he said, but that marriage started as a contract. I want to ask you properly this time. Not because we have to, but because I want to. Because I choose you, and I want you to choose me. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. Clara Hayes Cole, will you marry me again? Will you let me be your husband, not because of an arrangement, but because we love each other? Tears were streaming down Clara's face. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, Ethan, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then pulled her into a kiss as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and pink. When they returned to the city, they started planning a real wedding, not a cold ceremony in a small chapel, but a celebration with the people they loved. The children from the hospital were invited. Richard, who was doing better thanks to his treatments, would walk Clara down the aisle. Ethan's parents, who had watched their son transform over the past year, were thrilled. The wedding took place in a garden surrounded by flowers and sunshine. Clara wore a dress she had chosen herself, beautiful and elegant. Ethan wore a suit, but this time his eyes were full of love instead of resignation. When Richard placed Clara's hand in Ethan's, he whispered something that only they could hear. Catherine was right. Love always finds a way. The ceremony was beautiful and heartfelt. They wrote their own vows this time. Clara went first, her voice steady despite her tears. Ethan, when I met you, I thought I was entering a business arrangement. I thought I was sacrificing my chance at love to save my father. But you showed me that love can grow in unexpected places. You saw me when I felt invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You became my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. I promise to stand by you, to support your dreams, to call you out when you work too hard, and to love you with everything I have, today and always. Ethan's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. Clara, I was lost when you came into my life. I had built walls so high that I couldn't see over them anymore. I had convinced myself that love was a weakness, that trusting people would only lead to pain. But you broke down every single one of those walls with your kindness, your strength, and your unwavering goodness. You didn't just save those children at the hospital. You saved me. You showed me what it means to live with purpose, to love without fear, and to be vulnerable enough to let someone in. I promise to cherish you, to protect you, to be worthy of the love you've given me, and to spend every day trying to make you as happy as you've made me. I love you, Clara, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Clara like it was the first and last kiss all at once. The reception was filled with joy and laughter. Sophie, now in remission and healthy, was the flower girl and took her job very seriously. Marcus, who had taught himself to code and was now taking online college courses, gave a toast that brought everyone to tears. Mr. and Mrs. Cole taught me that family isn't just about blood, he said. It's about the people who show up for you, who believe in you, who love you even when you can't love yourself. They showed up for me and for every kid in that hospital, and now they're showing up for each other. That's what love looks like. As Ethan and Clara danced their first dance as a truly married couple, he pulled her close. Happy? He asked. Happier than I ever imagined I could be, Clara said. Me too, Ethan whispered. You know what the best part is? What? This is just the beginning. And it was. Over the years that followed, Ethan and Clara built a life that was rich in all the ways that mattered. The Cole Foundation grew, funding hospitals and programs across the country. Clara became the director, using her nursing background and her passion to make decisions that truly helped children in need. Ethan stepped back from some of his business ventures to focus on the foundation and on being present in his marriage. They traveled together, volunteered together, and continued to visit the hospital together every week. Some of the children they had known grew up and came back to thank them. Sophie graduated high school and was accepted into veterinary school, just like she had dreamed. She told them they were her inspiration. Marcus became a software engineer and created an app that helped hospital-bound children connect with tutors and friends online. He credited the laptop Ethan had given him with changing his life. Emma, who had spent months in the hospital, became healthy and strong. She visited Clara regularly, calling her Aunt Clara and bringing drawings and stories. Richard lived for 5 more years, long enough to see his daughter truly happy, long enough to meet his grandchildren. Because yes, Ethan and Clara had children. 2 of them, a boy and a girl. They raised them with the same values that had brought them together: kindness, generosity, and the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch. Their son, named Richard after Clara's father, had his mother's compassionate heart. Their daughter, Catherine, named after Clara's mother, had her father's sharp mind and her mother's gentle spirit. Both children grew up visiting the hospital with their parents, learning early that they had the power to make a difference. On their 10th wedding anniversary, 10 years from the real wedding, not the arranged one, Ethan and Clara returned to the same beach where he had proposed the second time. They sat on the sand, watching the sunset, their hands intertwined. Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been? Clara asked. If you had refused the arrangement? If I had stayed closed off? If we had just gone our separate ways after the contract year was up? Sometimes, Ethan admitted, and it terrifies me. The thought of living my whole life without knowing you, without loving you, it's unbearable.